So yeah, just on the medicinal effects of alcohol, like my dad has cancer right now, multiple myeloma, and that's like that does some nasty things to your bones. Mm-hmm. And so what I found out is there's been studies that like really hoppy beers can really help out with that.
Oh wow!
And so been really utilizing that.
So is that towards like the absorption of calcium?
Yeah, I believe so. So
very cool.
If you got low calcium bone stuff, get those hoppy beers, man.
Nice.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm sure in moderation.
Yep. Yeah.
Which is not a popular word in America, really.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and also, Zachariah, I'll be praying for your dad, and we all will be on Bible Over Brews here.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Yeah, everybody if everybody out there who's listening to this show could, send good vibes and prayers for Zachariah's father.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, also on the moderation note, if you don't want alcohol, there are non-alcoholic beers that have all those nice hops in them. So
that's right.
I don't want to hear about
it. Keith, any thoughts?
Oh, I was just thinking, like, if you drink bourbon while exercising and getting a COVID vaccine, are you just like a demigod?
Bad idea. Like fall off the treadmill.
You'll be like Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Oh my
But
for all the geeks out there.
Another note on storing how your body has to work through alcohol before it can get to like the other carbs. Like really higher proof alcohol, that doesn't happen as much. It's like I think it's like the complex carbs and like just other alcohol. Like if you're drinking straight vodka, that's probably not going to happen.
So go for the top shelf.
And on current topics, we are going to be going with Mr. Keith over here. Before we cut in, however, we have Masthead Swinging Tire. 5.5 ABV, Masthead Brewing Company. This hazy pale ale is perfect for spring, bursting with notes of citrus and stone fruit. This beer has just enough bitterness, hop flavor, and aroma to keep it quaffable.
Now, who in the world would bring the masthead?
Quaffable?
Who keeps going to mastheads?
Our masthead
Masthead
master.
is super quaffable.
Yeah. And they have great pizza.
Oh, man, they do have good pizza.
Amazing
like
pizza.
I had no idea.
Fried, whatever you call it. Fired pizza.
This is definitely a more traditional IPA.
Yeah. Well, this is...
Y'all making me hungry.
This is the hazy pale ale. But again, this is... Masthead, if I may be so courageous, Masthead has been an ongoing favorite of this podcast. I believe we've probably featured Masthead more times than any other brewery.
Yeah,
isn't Masthead like right next to the cathedral?
Yes.
It is right down the
So
street
we
from
could go
it.
to church and then go to Masthead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
at that.
Or if...
Well, you don't
You
want to go in
feel-
reverse. You don't want to be going to church
I mean...
I was gonna
drunk.
I was gonna say there's no
halfway
beer
there?
we've had on here that's made me feel more impaired than Masthead.
Yeah. You remember that one I gave you? I took to your house. I can't remember which one it was.
Oh my gosh. There was like a tall can with like 12% ABV.
That was...
These are tall cans. That's for sure. One
right
pint.
off the top, and it definitely is hazy. So they're not lying when they call this a hazy pale ale because you cannot really see through this. I almost feel like I'm in a fog looking through it.
Yeah.
So I could almost picture myself in New England, standing on the top of a hill in Maine, trying to see through the fog.
Oh, beautiful. Maybe one day you'll reach that dream.
But there's a tear in my eye.
Now, mind you, this is a real pleasant citrusy top note. Do you get that?
Yeah, instantaneously you get that citrus, almost like a lemony.
Yeah, and it's light. It's real light. It's like somebody sprinkled little droplets of lemon right on top of it.
Lemons in Maine. Or what? New England. What part of New England?
Edward,
yeah.
but you're
It's
right
good.
about their pizza. Their pizza's amazing.
It's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
This is a very heady beer. There's a lot of head to
Yeah,
this.
Well, look how poorly I poured mine. But I did it for the sound. So everyone out there
I have
could
to
hear
show
it.
you how to pour, man.
I did it for the sound.
Ah,
okay? I did
poor
something I like to
Edward.
pronounce.
Poor Edward.
Poor me. Like Eeyore. Poor me.
No one understands
Yeah.
me.
I tried.
It is crisp though. It has a very nice crisp flavor up front. Not too piney, but a little bit piney.
Yeah. There hasn't been many that I don't like from Mastheads.
Yeah, they're phenomenal. They really
The
are.
one that's truly, for me, is an acquired taste
I
there.
do taste the pine now.
Are there campfire ones?
That's
You remember
a
that?
nice-
Oh
Poured
man,
into
their
a forest.
campfire's great.
I don't
Yeah.
even think there's power in this one.
No.
Though I have
The
to
power
say,
of
so
suggestibility.
I'm going to tell you this up front. The one I have been waiting to bring on the show, every time I've gone for it, they've been out of it, and it frustrates me to no end. I have been waiting to bring on their jalapeno IPA. I love Masthead's jalapeno IPA. It's not spicy.
No.
But it has this beautiful, just tangy,
Would you just look at
just this
it?
beautiful tangy jalapeno flavor. A little bit smoky.
Yeah.
It's a little bit smoky, almost chipotle-ish, right?
I agree.
And so I've been waiting to bring that one on the show. Masthead, please hear me.
Yeah.
Make sure I get some.
That's my favorite IPA. It really is.
Oh my
Because
lord,
I don't
it's
really like
fantastic.
IPAs, honestly.
Yeah,
Same.
That is my favorite one.
yeah.
Oh, man.
I'm actually not really a
Let's
beer
bow our heads right now.
but this is good.
We are praying for you, Masthead.
Yes, this is good.
All right, Keith, over to you.
All right, here we go. So I really wanted to talk about the debate going on in Christian circles, now that we've been really in the full steam of the latest, movement of Black Lives Matter, between supporting the phrase and the movement of Black Lives Matter, the protests against police violence against people of color, versus supporting the group, the actual organization called Black Lives Matter. So I picked a kind of a placeholder article. This debate has gone, hundreds of times in various, evangelical, Catholic, whatever circles. I picked an article from our Sunday Visitor called "Can Catholics Support Black Lives Matter" by Brian Fraga, because our Sunday Visitor plays it pretty up the middle. So, but the point is the topic more than the article. But I'll read just a couple paragraphs here to get us started. The phrase "Black Lives Matter" has become more familiar amid protests and civil unrest sparked by George Floyd's death on May 25th. It has become even more highly divisive in society and the church. The conflict arises from some associating the phrase with the organization Black Lives Matter. Global Network Foundation Incorporated, which holds views that oppose church teaching, while others associate it only with the movement to raise awareness of police brutality against people of color. Deacon Harold Burke Sivers, a Black Catholic speaker, author, and radio host, told our Sunday Visitor that he believes people in general have difficulty separating Black Lives Matter as a movement for racial justice from the organization incorporated by leaders whose progressive politics affirm homosexuality, condemn cisgender privilege, and propose disrupting the quote-unquote Western prescribed nuclear family structure. So, and I can kind of speak to this a little bit personally. I've been to probably like a half dozen protests. My family, we went to one that was organized by a group of evangelical churches across the west and east side. And through a series of accidents and misunderstandings, I actually ended up on their leadership call, despite just being a casual attendee.
Whoops.
And there was a lot of talk around the room, whether it was a white pastor, a black pastor. It seemed like kind of a uniting center-right, center-left thing, that they wanted to be very specific whenever they talked to church groups, that they were saying Black Lives Matter in terms of the phrase and not talking about the organization. So there's definitely been, whether it's somewhere between a sincerely held belief that the organization's incompatible with Christian beliefs, or possibly triangulation that the mission statement seems so risque that they're worried about, spooking, mostly white church members. by saying the phrase Black Lives Matter and having that lead to a word association with the organization, which leads you to the mission statement, which leads you to these words that make a lot of Christians queasy. So one I wanted to highlight, which I think is the most interesting, there is a number of things about LGBTQ folks on the mission statement, but the one that a lot of people that just want to dismiss Black Lives Matter out of hand will throw out first is the quote on the nuclear family. Right. And I think that's an interesting one to see what people think about it. So let me find it over here. I should have scrolled to it ahead of time. So here we go. They say in their mission statement, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. So this is where a lot of folks will immediately go, oh, Black Lives Matter is against the nuclear family, and therefore it is incompatible with Christianity. And that's where then you get the distinction that folks who want to support racial justice will talk about, hey, we're supporting the phrase, not the group. And a lot of the folks who say that are people who, like, I think I could have, like, friendly disagreements about. But I also think it's interesting that, I mean, when I think about the Bible, like, I think about a lot of non-traditional families in the Bible. And so I think it's a way, I just wonder, I think there's a debate to be had about how much the nuclear family is, like, supposed to be really part and parcel of Christianity, and how much that is actually a construct of, like, modern American Christianism. I mean, you think about even in, like, other countries in the last 70 or 100 years, I mean, how many widows were there because of World War II across Europe? Those folks didn't have nuclear families.
Well, they started out with
I sometimes wonder if that's really a legit objection.
I don't know if white Jesus would approve.
I don't know. This makes me uncomfortable.
Now, I will say this. I grew up in the 80s, so I'm technically an atomic family. We didn't make nuclear.
I mean, I think that's a really interesting point. I think aren't there statistics, though, where a dad isn't present in a family, which, you know, in a lot of inner city black families is kind of the norm in some cases, unfortunately, and it perpetuates a lot of stereotypes and things like that. And I understand accepting that and not really having any sort of privilege associated or penalty assigned to a family of that structure. But I do think, you know, whether it's Christian or a secular thought, that nuclear family does seem to have psychological and emotional and maturity ramifications. Benefits.
Yeah, and I would say, why do you have to disrupt some other structure to legitimize yourself? Just go about your business. Like, why do you have to disrupt someone else to prove that you matter as well?
I'm pretty sure it's because you be a Kardashian.
That is not a nuclear family.
So, Keith, if I'm okay to ask you this, like, where do you stand? Or maybe, I don't know if it's even too broad of a question, too big of a, you know.
Yeah, so here's what I think they're actually
on the
getting
phrase
at.
versus the organization.
Right. So I think it's fine to support the organization, just get that out in front. And let me, in the context of this particular objection, let me expound on that.
Yeah.
I think what Black Lives Matter is getting at when they're talking about disrupting this idea of the nuclear family being the norm, the only way, or the super optimal way, and everything else is really not great at all, is I don't think they're trying to say nuclear family bad, but what they're trying to speak against is that so often the idea that less black people have nuclear families, with the mom and the dad and the children in the home, that because of that makes whatever they're protesting against, it delegitimizes that. People use that to say, well, if you guys just kept your families together better, then you wouldn't have these issues, which when we look at all the myriad of issues facing communities of color, that's not true. And I think one particular example that's striking is they estimate of black men who are, becoming adults around now, that 33% of them will end up incarcerated. And a lot of that has to go down to how many people were incarcerated in general. We're the most imprisoned population in the world, and we're putting people in jail for years for very minor crimes that haven't really hurt anybody. So when you think about that, think of yourself as, say, an 18-year-old woman, prospectively thinking about someday marrying and having children with, an 18 to 20-year-old black man, because maybe your community is 60 to 80% black. Like, how do you plan to have a family in a community where 33% of the men are going to end up in prison? So in that respect, like, a lot of it feels like really out of their control. And a lot of it really is, because a lot of our justice system, like, the justice depends on how much money you have. The whole idea of cash bail. A lot of people end up in jail for years because they couldn't make bail, and then they couldn't afford a good lawyer, and therefore they end up having to accept the plea deal, which puts them in jail for more years, whereas opposed to the white-collar criminal, got the fancy lawyer, got on bail, didn't face the psychological disadvantage of being in jail for all that time waiting trial.
Yeah.
And it really puts them in a way worse position, and it makes it so much harder to have a nuclear family. So I think almost everybody wants a stable nuclear family.
Right.
But
I think
it's
that's
so much
what
harder to have that.
I think that's what everyone should strive for.
So,
we're talking about Christianity here, and the Holy Family, Jesus, Joseph, and Mary. That's like the example for everyone to strive for. Yeah, it doesn't always happen for people, but
there's a few things I could touch on here. One is, I'm going to leave ethnicities and everything out of this and just tell you basic facts. All right, so
that's racist.
There is somebody I was speaking to in a specific company, and his brother had just got out of prison. Now, his brother had committed a federal crime.
I feel like we're talking about two things.
Federal crime. Well, hold on.
We're talking about different things here.
We're yes and no. Hold on. So, the federal crime was he had taken $1 and $5 bill templates for dollar bills and stolen them, which is technically a federal crime. So he had gone to a federal prison. Now, a first-class federal prison, I don't know if you know this, has no bars. Do you know that?
Separating the
It has
inmates?
no bars.
So they're all together?
Yeah. No. You have a room with a TV. You literally get a room with a TV.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a first class.
I get a room with a TV?
Yes. When if you were in prison
For myself?
It's
Yes.
like where a Bernie Madoff
Yes.
goes, or Epstein.
Yes. So
Yeah.
if you were
like
if you
Camp
were
Cupcake
imprisoned,
type
if you
deal.
were in prison in a first class prison, federally, you get your own prison, your own TV, everything else, no bars. And the reason why nobody breaks out of those is because if you do, you have to go to a real prison.
Right.
All
It's
right.
like, it's cushy here.
Yeah. So what happened was his brother made good connections, and everybody does, and he already had a job lined up for when he came out. Because who is in first-class federal prison? Mafia guys, military guys, etc., 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 etc. So
State legislator.
he already had I left that out. He already had jobs lined up for him and everything else coming out. The thing is that most people with minor crimes, to go back to Keith's point, with minor crimes don't end up in these really good prisons. Okay,
Most people across
the board,
races,
and
right.
that is true. Statistically, like he said, though, if you are not of a specific ethnicity, then oftentimes you do end up more likely to be arrested for minor crimes. Without going into the statistics, and I've seen it in my own life. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name localities, but I have seen it in my own life with people I know.
Yeah.
So I can back up what Keith is saying just from what I've seen.
So one reason I'm kind of passionate about it, and this is a totally selfish thing, is almost everything Black Lives Matter, the organization and the movement is fighting for, also helps white lives. I can find barely any example. So we talk about, one in three Black men potentially ending up in prison. Overall, for men, it's still like 1 in 9, and for white men, it's 1 in 17. Compared to other countries, the majority race in another country, like another Western country, 7 or 8% of those men ending up in prison is still way too high. Like we have way too many Black people being put in prison for really no good reason that you couldn't rehabilitate them any other way, and we also have way too many white people going in prison for the same things. It's not nearly as many as the Black people, but it's still.
Well, all of those white people and Black people and every color of people that's going to jail for doing crimes, they could have stayed home and not done the crimes.
We'd have better health outcomes for white people, better health care. I mean, a lot of white people are suffering without health care too.
This has totally transitioned.
Yeah.
I think, what makes this issue so complex is a lot of times there is defensiveness because it is, you're talking about cultural differences and acceptance and, a little bit of whitewashing of laws and perspective. But in my opinion, if we can just say both instead of, it has to be one way or another, because just because maybe, let's say optimally, and it's my opinion that the optimal family situation is nuclear. You have a mom and a dad, only because the more parenting involved, the better. So maybe optimal isn't always achievable.
Right.
So it should still not stack the deck against you, but we shouldn't sort of throw that out. And I'm very involved in the inner city youth, which is primarily the Black culture here in Cleveland. And anecdotally, I see an issue that needs to be addressed with the family and with the peers. So yes, we can address the prison system, the law enforcement system. Yes, absolutely. But we also need to address the family and the community. Even if it is not a nuclear, the community does need to step it up and self-police. And there are many that are. But I do think both are valid perspectives.
And I will vouch for this. Mike is actually very integral in the community inside his outreaches. He really is.
Thank you.
Well,
Cool.
On that subject, Keith, when I think, and I absolutely love my family, I could probably look up a lot of my family on the state penitentiary website and find them and introduce you guys to them. We grew up in a quote-unquote nuclear family. Mom and a dad, all right?
You're talking immediate family that's gone in
Yes.
the prison system.
Generationally. Okay. So having both or having the ideal nuclear family doesn't always mean having, if you got two parents, it doesn't mean you have two present, wholesome parents.
Correct.
Oh, right. Of course.
So I think, for me, looking at my own family, my own experience, it's so much more toward behavior and individual choice. At a certain point, no matter how bad my parents raised me or how good they raised me, I have to own my own decisions. You know what I mean? No matter what they bequeathed me, I have to own my own choices. And so I know a lot of Black families that have just one mom or maybe one dad, and they're amazing people.
Right.
Yeah.
They're choosing to not break the law. On the other hand, I can see that outpouring and that crying of man, I wish I had some guidance better. I can see that too, because of even if you got both or someone around who comes around and visits you every other weekend or whatever the situation is, it doesn't mean that they're present. Doesn't mean that it's a good, healthy relationship teaching you and guiding you to pursue other things. So it's such a complex issue. It really is.
So I think this gets into another side of it where it's not just about there's families that don't have a mom or don't have a dad.
Yeah.
taking the pedal off of like the nuclear family as the end all be all actually reaffirms what's happened historically to almost everywhere. It happens to a lot of cultures today where it's the corny proverbial it takes a village to raise a child, where you have grandparents living together with parents, you have the surrogate aunt who's a friend, but they kind of take up that mantle of a core family member. So talking like even folks with a mom and a dad, I think it can be so much richer if you have a whole community involved, and we're not saying, oh, it has to be mom and dad, but it has to be a bunch of invested adults. It's just a community that's invested in raising children.
Keyword investment.
I mean, part of that comes down to, though, was his parents praying to white Jesus or Hispanic Jesus? Because, I mean, although I'll admit, Jesus is so much cooler. Obviously, there's a lot more bling on white Jesus.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
All right, you want to go there, Aaron? That's fine. I mean,
there are Middle Eastern, olive skin. Like, let's just. Who cares?
Yeah, there are some.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't. And if Jesus was one race, it doesn't mean that like those are the people that matter to him, or he matters to them. It doesn't matter. Like Jesus came for all.
You're
everyone.
missing it. Which one's
what am
cooler,
I missing?
Jesus or Jesus? Jesus is much cooler.
I mean, that's pronunciation. That
It's
we're
much
getting
cooler.
into semantics. Let's say Jesus. Let's say Jesus. Yeshua. Yahweh.
Are you debating a joke right now?
No, I'm
totally
no. Jehovah.
That's a great discussion, Keith, man, and it's so multifaceted, man. Wow.
Yeah, I think it's huge, but I do agree that even better than the nuclear would be a whole community. But that is not really a race issue. Honestly, it's a modern issue, because that throws into mental illness. How do we care as a culture for mental illness? That elderly, how do we care? I mean, how many people are just put into nursing homes? Yeah, to keep it on topic.
Thrown out.
It also applies to race, but I do think the modern culture has disintegrated parenting, raising generations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe the term nuclear family might not be even the best word for it.
Right.
I mean, family, whatever, community, whatever. I need somebody who's going to be present as a human being in my life, in relationship.
Right.
Present.
Correct.
And you pointed out the word that Keith said, invested. Like, you make a choice to be present in someone's life.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's important, and whatever that looks like, that's important for someone to make a decision of, I'm going to be present in your life.
Frankly, I'm offended because nobody took seriously the atomic family. I mean, they completely laughed and glossed
I don't
over
know
it.
what the
We were the
atomic
first
family
latchkey
is.
kids.
So, Keith, I'm going to look at this as a learning opportunity for me. So, the Black Lives Matters organization, does it really speak to that? Because honestly, what I think turns a lot of people off, at least in terms of like what the media pushes out, right? So much that if you don't accept, and I can say this in a sense with some quote unquote authority, right? Because I'm a minority, that if you don't accept XYZ, then you're not a racist. If you don't accept these certain things, then I will view you as being racist. So I think that was pushed so hard in a sense from the media initially after George Floyd that unless you quickly bow to one knee, then you're racist.
I agree.
So my point is that so what's the biggest message for the organization, not the phrase?
Okay. I think it is meant to be a broad coalition of folks fighting for racial justice. I think the mission statement is it actually sets remarkably broad boundaries. Like, even when you talk about the LGBTQ stuff, it's not saying you have to take a specific stance on gay marriage, for instance. It's talking about basically affirming like that we shouldn't be trampling on like essential rights to, I think the subtext is like housing and healthcare and, ability to get jobs, that we should be setting aside or we shouldn't be rejecting. I'm fumbling around here, but I think
rights.
Fundamentally we need to affirm everybody's humanity and take a broad look at that and not be excluding anybody because maybe they are something else other than, maybe they have some other mantle they take up other than stopping, racial injustice.
Yeah.
So when it talks about, hey, we are okay with gay, lesbian, transgender folks. So come on in. We will listen to you. And I think even though when you look at a lot of Christian doctrine that might make a lot of Christians queasy about signing on to that, but simply listening, simply respecting people, I think is something like everybody can and should be able to get behind, even if there are doctrinal issues when you get into the real deep particulars of that.
Yeah.
Well,
No, I appreciate that. I guess the only thing that I initially, after the whole George Floyd incident, when it appeared to be pushed so hard that even for a person like me who's always been in relationships with any person of color, any minority, any black person, whatever, I was in a relationship with them, like as a human being. Mm-hmm. But if I didn't even accept, even in my own minority upbringing, certain things, I was considered racist myself.
Right. There was a pressure initially to like put a black square on your Instagram or
and
your
I
Facebook.
Felt, and I felt like, wait a minute, like
take a stance.
My whole life I've been in relationships.
Right. If you don't take a stance, you're taking one.
I didn't I didn't know how not to be that because I grew up with that. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you want to be honest, I mean, if you ask me who the person I was most discriminating against or racist towards, it wasn't towards any black person or any Hispanic person or whatever. It was against white people. So I kind of came from almost another extreme.
Can I ask you why?
I'm a little offended, but okay.
Well, no, I'm not offended, but can I ask you why?
Because I grew up in a mostly minority neighborhood, Hispanics and blacks.
And
why
did you feel that like towards white people?
We didn't want to be white.
Okay, so you didn't have to be because you're not.
We didn't.
Like, so live your life.
And it was a development thing. We took,
My thing is not to cut you off, but the way I look like at this is like, I'm white, you're Hispanic, other people are black, other people are this and that. And who made us this way? And who made us this way?
I agree.
It all goes back to God. Like, he did this, and it's through no fault of our own. Mm-hmm. So none of us should feel guilty about what happened. Absolutely. And yes, there's a past. I'm not involved in that. You're not involved in that. There's a past history of America. And
I'd be careful there.
Here's the problem with that. All of you have completely said that you are against the phobic people. I think the phobic people need to get together, create their own gender, call it phobegenderia, right? Okay. Yeah. And have their own conferences, and we can make this a thing, right? Everybody gets their own booth. Everybody gets their own booth. Okay, you could have, the Zen phobias in their own booth. And we need to make sure this conference, because everybody is discriminating against the phobic people. They need their own representation.
Well, that's kind of like a funny. That's kind of like my point. My point was, Edward.
Yeah,
was that discrimination works both ways. Mm-hmm. It isn't just that white people can be discriminating or racist against black people. It absolutely works both ways, and it has. But the narrative, as of lately, because of George Floyd, it only seemed like, man, racism is only white people against black systemic racism. Right.
But I don't want to get roped into that.
No, I
have black people who I love.
But you're a human being.
Puerto Rican people
I'm
who
a human
I love.
being. We have discriminations that exist and biases that exist because of the way that we grew up. And it's a learning curve, and it's a human development thing that I realized at a certain point. I look back at even in my own church upbringing, I'm like, we were mostly all Spanish. We didn't go canvassing the streets for white people or black people or anyone else. We didn't care about.
Maybe this sounds like lazy.
We didn't care about doing that. I just
think we're all humans bumping around on this earth. We're all children of God, and guess what? We're all future corpses.
I agree with you. I agree with you. What I'm just saying is that it just can't be one way. It can't be just white against black or black against white or Hispanic against whatever or whatever,
Right.
whatever it is. Man, it's got to be a two-way street for all of us to move on and be in a relationship. I mean, it really does. So that in terms of the whole Black Lives Matter things, it came off so strong in a sense that even it's like
But I feel like you said something like 5 minutes ago that I think I tried to touch on, but like there was this
7.
feeling of like, what?
It was 7 minutes.
go ahead.
7 minutes ago. That we all, like, when it happened, like, you had to take a stance. Right? Did you feel like this pressure? Like, you have to say something.
Me?
Everyone has to say something.
Yeah.
Or
It's
else-
true. That's
by-
why I ended up at protests.
Yeah.
I felt
But
felt
I-
it was good pressure, but
Yeah,
I personally didn't feel that pressure. I knew that it
didn't-
existed.
Well, I knew.
recognized
I
it.
feel the same as you.
Yeah.
I felt it, but I said I'm not going to say anything. But then I realized, like, some people think, like, by not saying anything, they're saying something.
Absolutely.
And I just feel like this advent of social media in the last decade or decade and a half, it's like everyone's like their own publicist and they have to do something. Like, no, we don't. Like, we don't have to, and it doesn't mean we don't care about people.
Yeah, you're
Because we're
lazy.
not proving it to someone else. I saw a thing on Instagram the other day that said, and the Oscar for 2020 goes to the people who posted the black squares on their Instagrams and never said anything again.
Yeah.
They were wrong. It's Trump.
Because it's just like virtue signaling.
I
I care. And
I
then, like,
recognize that for what it was, and personally, I don't want to throw even them under judgment for deciding to do that because everybody's at a different place.
Right.
yeah.
You know, if
And
they
we
felt
all
like-
internalize everything different.
If
like
they truly
COVID
felt
and-
like that's what it took for them to get to wherever they think they needed to be in terms of any kind of reconciliation, I'm not any person to judge that. I just knew that wasn't the right path for me because I feel like I've been on that path in
Yeah.
a sense. So I don't want to judge that. I'm just saying that, man, I saw that pressure come so strong that, I don't want even people pandering to me. It felt like it was a bit pandering, like, oh, we need to start listening to people of color and people who are brown, and I'm like, all of a sudden,
like, why didn't you do that before?
all of a sudden, my kids are thinking, like, they start looking at themselves like, I didn't even know we were brown. Like, when did that happen?
So thinking about the black squares and all reminds me of there's a funny episode. I believe it's of the Reply All podcast, and a few months back they had an episode about the trend of white people sending their black friends a few dollars on account of systemic racism. Like, they would literally send them a Venmo where it'd be
That's
like, here's
so
$4.50
awful.
for a cup of coffee. Sorry about the systemic racism.
Dude.
And that's almost like
that
saying,
is-
"Oh,
that
you
is-
need this."
Isn't it like reverse
Ow.
racism?
That's awful.
I mean, if I were black, I'd still take the $4.
Yeah, I'm going to take the money, but I'm not going to be happy about it.
But still, it brings up a good point. Is like that this is, I mean, in a sense, I think I definitely would respect someone more who takes a measured response and isn't immediately jumping on whatever feel good, low impact bandwagon. I think though, regardless of whether it's like you think it's really like a deep seated problem that just a particular race is feeling and it involves a particular response like Black Lives Matter, or you feel like I think some acknowledgement that there's a lot of problems and a lot of people are facing crap right now, and a lot of them that folks on the Black Lives Matter side are saying that would make a big difference would actually help just about everybody. And I think recognizing that there's a lot of hurt out there and talking about what can we do, and it's often a thing bigger than what we can just do. Like me protesting doesn't solve inequalities in healthcare. We're talking about massive problems on an entire society scale that need a lot of people feeling that they're
Why are
like
you talking
big
about
issues.
healthcare now? We talked about this is like the third thing we're talking about.
That was just an example
cover
of
that
an
later.
issue that's a little disparity. Yeah.
No, I think this is. I mean, this could have been a whole podcast. I do something I'm really passionate about too, and something I know you'll agree with, Keith, is that I have, and just go off your Facebook wall, whoever's on Facebook, you can predict the people that are going to immediately turn to delegitimize the meaning of Black Lives Matter by the organization of Black Lives Matter or the crime they commit. And all that is wrong, because that is just now an echo chamber, and you're impersonalizing, you're not respecting people's emotions and mourning. You know, I do think a lot of that, and I it's mostly a Christian thing. Honestly, most of my Christian friends are so dogmatic, and they're just echoing each other, and it's embarrassing, and it goes all the way down to taking a knee with the flag, and it's just like, are you going to legitimize anything of the opposite side?
Well, not anything. I mean, I need to retain my neighborhood and my own livelihood.
I'm not racist, but
it infringes on my personal rights. I'm sorry. I'm
right. I mean, you can't be. I'm not racist, but anytime there's anything associated with a black cause, I'm going to stand against. You know, at some point, let's call a spade a spade. You're effing racist. You know?
I think you hit at what the primary purpose of the Black Lives Matter mission statement is, which is to make the people who reflexively go there feel deeply uncomfortable and loud about it. Like, it's actually kind of calling people out.
Yeah, I agree.
Like they literally only want the people who will set these things aside.
You should be uncomfortable. Everybody should be uncomfortable right now with your history, with the current events.
So let me ask you, Keith, though, is the phrase people who truly believe in just a phrase itself, is there any legitimacy to that and not accepting the organization?
I think there's enough people who say that who I would agree with 99% of everything else, that I think it would be really presumptuous of me to say that they're arguing in bad faith. Because they are trying to balance, like, you know, you can read these particular line items and feel a lot of different ways about it because there's a lot of interpretation, and they're trying to cast a wide net. And I don't think if somebody disagrees with those particular mission statement items, but otherwise feels deeply committed to ending racial inequality, I don't think they're acting in bad faith.
Okay. All right, so two things real quick. One, we do have two guests we want to bring on when it comes to social justice. So those two guests we plan on bringing on here shortly. And I think everybody in the room knows the two people I'm talking about. The other one is, I do want to also say, remember that I am Czech, and the Czech people were never involved in the slave trade.
Dude, don't do that. Don't do that. You should be just as uncomfortable, privileged.
Don't forget to catch us on all social media. Please try to contribute on Patreon or on anchor.fm/Bible over Brews. We'd appreciate the contributions. Everybody, Godspeed!